This June 12th session of the Liberty Lake Planning Commission is in order. We should start with a roll call.
Okay, Joe Mann,
Here.
Tom Stallberg,
Here.
Jim Bumker,
Here.
DG Garcia,
Present.
Charlie Jenks, Dale Robbins, Bill Follier,
Here.
Gene Hushel,
Here.
and Troy Mullenix.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Next is general business.
If I may, so both Charlie and Dale did request that they be excused. Charlie's traveling, as is Dale.
Could I have a motion to excuse them from the meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Sahlberg, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Now we'll go to general business, introduction of our city engineer.
So I'm ecstatic to be introducing our new city engineer, Luke Michaels. He's hit the ground running. He comes with a great deal of background in geotechnical engineering. And with that, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Luke Michaels, and like Lisa said, my background's primarily in geotechnical engineering with a lot of testing and inspection work throughout the years, and I'm happy to be here working for the city.
Welcome.
Are you a native?
I'm a Montanan, and I moved over to North Idaho about 5.5 years ago from Montana.
Close enough.
Welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Welcome. Glad to have you on board.
Thank you.
We're gonna keep you busy. Review of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Could I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Commissioner Sahlberg, second.
Second.
Commissioner Foyer. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes from our May 8th meeting. Any questions or comments or changes to the minutes? Motion to approve,
No move.
Commissioner Foyer. Moved, second. Second, Commissioner Halsell. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Thank you. Into our workshops. So first is a proposed lighting code amendments, and I understand we have guests here to speak to that.
Yes, first off, Amy's going to share a little bit of follow-up information from that was requested by the commission from the last meeting. Amy, would you like to take it away?
Sure. So I just wanted to follow up on a few things that I heard as we were kind of going through our discussion. You guys had asked for some examples of other developments that have utilized G3 lighting. I went back through all of the reviews that I've done since I've been here that would have allowed G3 lighting, and none of them are built yet. So I don't have a good example to point you to. We do have a couple that are choosing to utilize that over on Appleway, but they're still in the construction phase. So eventually there will be some examples, but right now I really don't have a good direction to point you in. You guys had also asked about the noise regulations, and I sent those out on May 14th. So if anybody didn't receive that or has any questions, please let me know and we can touch base on those. I also heard some concerns about how the current proposal might impact future city facilities. And so I wanted to point out that the amendments as proposed specifically apply to commercial uses. So they wouldn't necessarily have an impact on publicly owned facilities. So I just wanted to point that out. You guys had asked for some examples of other outdoor recreational uses. So what you see on the screen is just kind of a quick ChatGPT search and some uses that are not otherwise defined or discussed in our code. There are a few additional ones that are in our code and are in a few, future slides, but I just wanted to kind of point out a few other ones that maybe, just to throw some other uses on your radar that would be considered outdoor recreation facilities and could potentially use the amendments that are being proposed. Next slide.
Any questions?
So, yeah, a question. Concert venues would not be considered as a outdoor recreational.
So yes, we do have, those are addressed in our code. The ones on the previous slide were not specifically addressed in
Okay.
our code, but those ones, stadiums and arenas are included in the definition of participant and spectator sports.
Okay.
So those would be allowed as a limited use in the M1, M2, and the open space zone. And they're allowed as outright permitted uses in the C1, C2, and the I zone.
Thank you.
Parks and recreation is another use category that would allow for outdoor recreation facilities, but those again would be publicly owned, so those would not be commercial uses.
Okay.
Any
Ne-
other questions?
Next slide. So I thought the definition, it would be helpful to have the definition of participant sports and participant and spectator sports facilities. That they are recreational uses in which sport or recreation is conducted within an enclosed structure or outdoor facility. They have a pretty good list of some other uses that would be in that category. They're not all outdoor recreation, so they wouldn't all use the lighting, but these are just some additional examples of what's included in that definition and would be allowed in those zones. Again, stadiums and arenas being included in that definition. Next slide, please. So again, the spectator sports is allowed as a limited use in the M1, the M2, and the O zone. The limited use standards you see up on the screen are specific to the M1 and the M2. The O zones they're a little bit different, but they're mostly the same. Again, there's a good list in A of gun and archery ranges, racetracks, riding facilities, paintball facilities, stadiums, arenas, water or amusement parks, and those are explicitly prohibited in the M1 and the M2 and the O zone. So within that limited use category, those would be explicitly prohibited in those zones. I also wanted to point out that the limited use section also addresses that lighting shall be directed downward and the hours of operation shall be limited to 7 and 11, from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. There's a buffer for adjacent residential uses. There's a maximum building footprint of 30,000 square feet and a requirement that a sidewalk or a pathway be provided. Within the O zone, it also requires that it be only allowed on privately owned property. The maximum building footprint is a little bit smaller in the O zone. It's it's quite a bit smaller. It's 15,000 square feet versus 30. And they are not required in the O zone. They would not be required to have a sidewalk or pathway. So I just wanted to point out that these standards exist outside of the lighting chapter. So these would also need to have some changes in order to recognize what I believe the applicant is trying to accomplish. Next slide. So I also wanted to show the map again of where the potential impact to these changes could be. The applicant revised their language to take out the G3. So that's where you'll see that crosshatch in the middle. That's publicly owned up the northern part of the freeway. And then right in the center, that dark blue is the M3. And these facilities are not allowed in the M3, so that would also not be a potentially impacted area. That's all I have. Are there any additional questions?
Nowhere in any of those descriptions did you mention golf driving ranges. You said miniature golf, but I
Yeah.
didn't.
So golf courses is a defined use in our use matrix, and it's only allowed in I believe it's only allowed in the public zone. We would not necessarily classify this as a golf course because it is different in nature. It's closer, I would say, to like an outdoor bowling alley, but they would be lumped into that spectator sports
Okay.
use. So they would be allowed as a limited use in the M1, the M2, and the O zone, and permitted outright in the C1, C2, and the industrial zone.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks for looking those up, Amy. Thank you. We have guests to speak. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Just Scott Weddling with Topgolf, Director of Real Estate Development. Pleasure to be here. Thought we'd come back and try to answer some of the questions that we had last time to provide some additional context and some real life examples. I know there's some issues with, what does G5 even mean? It's just a random letter and a number thrown together. If you ask even myself, until I started becoming somewhat of a lighting expert because of these meetings here, but we actually did get some photos and some drone flybys of the Boise venue, which I think is going to be a very close, if not almost exact example of what we're proposing here. So as we walk through, I just want to show you guys those kind of things. Hopefully it'll put the picture to the word and help you visualize it a little bit better. But once again, Topgolf. Next slide, please. So some of the text amendment language other than the lighting was the hours of operation. Basically, we're proposing to be open to public until 12 a.m. on Sunday through Thursday, and then open to 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturdays. And the reason we worded it here, like you see here, basically, once we close, we would have 30 minutes to dim the lights down in the outfield, which I'll show you an example of what that looks like, to allow 30 minutes for the ball picker upper guy, I think that's his official title, to drive the outfield, pick up the golf balls and bring them back into the building. So basically, we're allowing a 30-minute slot, and then after that, the lights would be shut down for good. We realized that the M3 zone was kind of a weird limbo area, so we're actually going to remove that request for this text amendments to apply to the M3. So we're no longer going to request the M3 zone be modified or changed because of this text amendment. And then in the original application, I think there might have been a little clarification of in that third bullet point. You'll see the requested exemption applies to those zones that you see there, River District M, River District C. River District C and M, I believe, are along the highway there. So we wanted to make sure those were included in the highway corridor. We are going to put language in there to provide a 150-yard buffer to residential zones. So you can be a little bit more comforted that we're not be like right next door to somebody's house. We want to try to create that buffer room between our proposed location and a residential area. And then also in respect to Little League fields and things of that nature, we thought we could put a restriction of 30 feet or lower that these fixtures could be mounted to. That way, if someone does come and wants to install a Little League baseball field, they would have to come back and do their own approval process. Next slide, please. So just a recap of the fixtures that we're actually talking about here. These are the Game Changer 500 lights. It's basically the product name, but basically in that red circle, you'll see how they're mounted there. This is a picture of our Wichita venue. But the fixtures that we're going to do the same fixtures here, but we're going to slide them back into the building a little bit more than what you see here, just to further, I guess, protect against any light spillage going skyward. So those buildings will actually they'll still be mounted to the beam that you see there. They'll just be recessed back. So they'll be behind the overhang of the floor above it. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of the elevation drawing. As if you're standing in the outfield looking at the building and the hitting bays. So just kind of show you where those light fixtures are located that you just saw on the screen before. So that would be the total height of the building is about 36.5 feet or so. The light fixture will be mounted on the ceiling of the second level, pointed toward the outfield, approximately 27 feet above the finished floor elevation of the first floor. Next slide, please. So since the last meeting, we did hire a drone company to come do some fly around of our Boise venue to kind of give an idea of the lighting, what it looks like if you're, at a higher level. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of the outfield with the building pointing out, and then in the next one, I believe there's a video, you kind of like see it fly around. Yeah. I think it was just good just to kind of see how the lighting of the outfield compared to the highway that's adjacent to it, or the adjacent parking lot, or even the hotels on the top right corner. It's pretty visually, so you can kind of see what we're proposing here. And then we, next slide, we have a video of the same exact situation, I believe, but it's, if you can go to the next slide, it'll show the after hours. Yes. So you'll see like maybe like halfway through the clip, once that guy starts turning back for the yellow, it'll go to the dim. Right about now. So that's kind of like what it would look like at the 12 or 1 o'clock time, right where we go from normal output to about 30%. And we also turn off a bunch of the fixtures as well. We just need enough light for the guy to see where he's going in the outfield. Next slide, please. Once again, it's just showing the outfield, the lighting that's on that field compared to like houses and areas in the background in the highway. So it's pretty similar. So just to recap, I guess the text amendment summary, there's really 3 main items that we're asking for. Allow private parties to reach an agreement, a business agreement, if there were any light trespass past our outfield, for example, into a commercial property or commercial parking lot behind the building, that we would come to agreement with that particular business owner. The expanded hours of operation I was just talking about, Sunday through Thursday till 12, and then 30 minutes of dim time for cleanup, and then Friday and Saturday till 1. And then 30 minutes of cleanup time, and then allow light fixtures of a G5 rating or less under the bug rating system. So those are the 3 main items that we're asking for in those respective zones as part of this text amendment. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Okay. I hope the pictures did some justice to it. I mean, it helps me a lot. Just, you know, you're looking at G3, G4, G5, but just to show what it looks like from above or from the side.
Any questions, anyone? Yes, sir, Jim?
Yeah, the language with respect to the lighting shall be located no closer than 150 yards from the boundary of the nearest residential zone. I didn't see that on the last slide that you showed.
Okay. It would be in there if that's what you're asking.
And then how was that 150 yard measured from where? I understand the boundary of the nearest residential zone, but where would it be measured from with respect to the facility? Would it be measured from, can you go back like a couple slides to?
If I may, from a code perspective, it would be measured from the property boundary.
But that was my question, because here it says what the lighting source, I think is what it says, 150 yards from the boundary of the. You're talking about the lighting, but really what you're talking about is the boundary of the facility.
Yes, so the boundary, the property boundary, and the reason why we do that in zoning is because the proposal is what it is today. They could add in the future, et cetera. And so again, it just typically, any setbacks are measured from property boundary.
Or the property boundary. Okay, that was the question. Okay.
Okay, other questions?
I just have a couple comments if I can.
Yes, sir.
So as I read the height limit 30 feet from the ground, I was just at the facility in Salt Lake, right, the day after Memorial Day. I was looking really hard for lights, and they're exactly where he says they are. They're right on that beam right there under the, at the forward leading edge of the roof section. None on the poles. One thing I observed there was if you notice, the design of the structure is like a quarter moon. And the one in Salt Lake has residential right smack dab up against the parking lot. If you've been to Salt Lake's facility, I'm assuming. And so there's multifamily, single family right up tight to the building side of it. And in that scenario there, the downrange or the playing field was actually pointed straight towards the freeway. We came back through there later that night and I looked over to see if there was any glare from the facility, and there was none. I mean, you couldn't even tell it was there, really, to be honest with you. I noticed all the lights pointing down at the playing field, but I asked the question about the 30 feet because I noticed the playing field is up and down and probably for drainage or to capture balls or whatever reason. So you might want to specify where that's measured from.
Again, so code's pretty explicit. So that would be from the ground elevation for where where it's being mounted.
At the front door? Okay, so at the back of
So-
the building.
Yeah,
Okay.
Right, it's from the concrete slab of the
So
first
yeah, no,
floor.
I get it. Just asking the question, do you need to clarify that? And maybe it's somewhere else already. So yeah, other than that, I had a great time. Spent a few $100.
Other questions, comments? Yes, sir. Commissioner Mullins.
Yeah, I think, Commissioner Foyer, addressed my height question as well. On the fixtures themselves, they were called Game Changer 5000s or something,
500, yeah.
or 500, yeah. How many typically on a design that's being proposed, say Boise, for example, approximately how many of those fixtures are on the building?
15.
15?
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you recall what the output was for the stadium here, just so we can kind of get a math comparison? I know we've been hung up on a certain percentage of light output, but
Yeah, I actually wrote it down.
okay.
So this facility, would have 15 fixtures. I believe Ridgeline has 73 fixtures, the same fixtures.
Oh, they're
The
the same
wattage,
output?
the wattage output is 520 watts per fixture for us. And then for Ridgeline is 1300 per fixture. And then the total wattage, if you were to add everything up, for us would be 7.8 kilowatts. And for the Ridgeline is 100 kilowatts. So a little bit, whatever that is, mathematically.
And as far as light output goes, do you have the lumen value on that for Ridgeline? Because wattage can be a bit deceiving, I think, when it comes to actual light output.
I got it in an email. I can let you know at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go. I got my guy back there.
Yeah, of course, yes, sir.
From an operational standpoint, I'd like to share my experience with Topgolf in Las Vegas. A couple months ago, Las Vegas got lots of lights. Topgolf facility is outside the practically the city limits, it looks like. And it's adjacent to the airport. As we're driving up there, the GPS that we were using in the car went bonkers. And so my son says, "Oh, we'll just go ahead and follow look for the lights. Look for the lights." That was not an answer because.
Could you bring that mic, bring that mic a little closer to you?
And we didn't have to use the lights as a location for the Topgolf. That's what that is. In other words, they weren't so obtrusive that would cause us to find the location looking for the lights.
so if I may,
Sure.
we're all talking about a specific application here. The question before you has nothing to do with the specific application.
Right.
The application before you is changing the code, and I want to remind you, and I've said this at each of our meetings, I want to remind you that it's important for you to look at the implications of the code change for all potential applications that it may apply to. This is a code amendment, and so we can't look just at this application. You have to be looking more broadly at what the implications would be citywide. Or in the zone wide, as the case may be.
Commissioner Solberg.
Yes, thank you, Lisa, for that. Again, you've reminded us each time, but I think that unless we are going to try to get into the minutia of the future and being able to tell exactly what other uses we can have, we have a very thorough list, thank you, Amy, of the uses that this would apply to in the foreseeable future.
Absolutely.
Well, and from my perspective, the changes are so innocuous in terms of the effect it would have on the surrounding areas. I don't see, in looking at all the zones and look at them in their proximity to housing, commercial operations, transportation, all that, I don't see personally that it's going to have a major negative effect.
So I have another question for you all, and that is that, as Amy pointed out, in the zones that would allow these, recreational facilities, these private outdoor recreational facilities, there is also a limited use standard. Now, I want to remind those of you, Tom, Joe, I know you were on the planning commission, and Phil, you may have been when we did the lighting ordinance. And if you will recall, we added those specific requirements to the lighting ordinance. Specifically because it was already in the code. Now, we can absolutely, as part of this, go back. If we change the lighting ordinance, we should also in parallel change those limited use standards. And so that is something that if this is ready to go forward, I think we would need to include that as well.
That makes sense.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Yes, sir.
Can I clarify? My question was simply because of the hour change that's being proposed, trying to get an apples to apples comparison of the brightness of it. And if that's going to be detrimental to extend those hours to have that something that bright. So I understand and I agree completely with you as far as your position. That was why I had asked that question. Were you able to get an answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the lumens?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, you got it really quick, but Top Golf is 720,000 lumens and the high school was 9,240,000.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's a good example.
Yes.
A very good example.
Holy cow.
Commissioner Solberg.
So with regard to the hours thing, that would be something that I would be concerned about too, except that we have businesses that are open until 2 o'clock in the morning every single day, including their brighter parking lights for the business themselves, and not just places that serve until 2 in the morning. There are places that we have that run 24 hours a day and their lights and their parking are on the entire time too. I don't think that this is, in my opinion, it's not unreasonable to us to ask to extend our hours another hour on both sides.
So my question to all of you is, with the changes to the limited use standards and the addition of the River District changes, which the lighting code in River District is exactly the same as in City Development Code. So with those changes, are we ready to do the SEPA review and schedule a hearing for July?
Just the clarification again, I want to make sure I understand is that the distance from the facility requesting the exemption is 150 yards from the facility, not necessarily from the lighting source itself.
As measured.
It's from the
As
boundary. of the
measured from the
facility.
property boundary, and
Okay.
that's certainly something that if you would like that clarified in the ordinance, we could do that. But that would,
If it's not necessary, it's
with-
not necessary, but
with
okay.
no more specific direction, that would be the way staff would interpret it, would be from the property boundary.
So I'll jump in to answer your question. As it relates to recreational facilities as a whole, yes, I would be in favor of that action moving forward.
Do we need a motion for that?
No,
Okay.
it was a question. Staff can,
Yeah,
we'll
any,
keep that up if that is, if all of your questions and concerns have been addressed. If there's additional discussion, we can certainly do another workshop, but if you feel like you're,
Does anyone have an objection to moving forward?
No.
Using like, yep.
Okay.
awesome.
Thank
All
you,
right.
DG.
Thank you for the direction.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Our next subject is the proposed amendment for fueling stations as an accessory use.
And I will be presenting on this. There we go. So, next slide, please. So we've workshopped this for a few times and, we do have an allowance for gas station convenience stores as a limited use in the RDC and the C2 zones. And again, these are the limited use standards we have. They have to be located they cannot be located within 1,000-foot radius of a wellhead. The pump islands and other fuel dispensing tanks shall be located at least 25 feet from the right-of-way line, and convenience stores and gas stations shall not exceed 8 pump sites. And the building footprint shall not exceed 8,000 square feet per lot. A pump site is 1 dispenser, which may be double-sided. Now, again, we only have this use, gas station combined with a convenience store, which is a very common type of gas station, but it's not the only gas station. We do also see gas stations as accessory uses. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so we're proposing a new use category for your consideration. That would be accessory fueling station limited to the RDC and C2 zones, which are freeway commercial zones, as is the limited use that we have for gas stations. But they must be accessory to a permitted principal use within the zone. Next slide, please. So again, just to point out, what we're looking at really are the red zones on this map. Next slide, please. And again, as you can see, gas station and convenience store are listed as a limited use in C1 and C2. And just, it's also in the M3 zone, but in the M3 zone, it's kind of a funky one. You can only have a new gas station in the M3 zone if it's replacing an old one.
Lisa, before you move on, could you go back one slide and show us
Sure.
that area? This
Back one slide. please.
location.
I thought it was both sides.
It's all the red zones,
Which are.
RDC or freeway commercial, C1.
Not the
C2,
purple
I'm
stuff?
sorry, C2. It's not the purple stuff. It's not the mixed use zones, just the red zones.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. And again, so we would be looking at RDC in the River District as well. Or it is allowed, convenience gas stations are allowed there. Next slide, please. So we're proposing to add that these limited use standards in the RDC and C2 zone. Again, the same, fueling station must be accessory to a principal use that's permitted within the zone. Underground storage tanks and stormwater disposal shall not be located within the 1,000-foot radius of a wellhead. Pump islands and other fuel dispensing tanks shall be located at least 25 feet from the right of way. And fueling stations shall not exceed 12 pump sites. A pump site is 1 dispenser, which may be double-sided. Next slide, please. So accessory to what? It could be accessory. So again, this was through a Google search of what types of uses have accessory gas stations. There's a few that are crossed out, convenience stores because we already cover it. Agricultural uses because they're not permitted in the city. We're an urban city. Industrial parks are not permitted in the city, but there's other uses might include the big box store, fleet fueling stations, grocery stores, marinas and boat docks, truck stops, delivery and logistics companies, construction companies, public transit agencies, waste management companies, utility companies, taxi and ride sharing services, government agencies, corporate fleets, long haul trucking companies. Now, I do want to caution you here that this government agency is never going to be big enough to need 12 gas pumps at their fueling facility. We have one. Oh, no, technically we have two. We'll have one at the Public Works facility. But having said that, these are some of the uses, and one of the questions is, as we saw with the limited use standards for recreation facilities, there were some uses that were specifically excluded in the limited use standards. And I had heard early on in the early conversations that there were potentially some concerns related to some of the types of uses that might have an accessory gas station. So I guess my question to all of you is, are there any of these uses that we have listed up here, or any others that I haven't thought about, or that ChatGPT hasn't thought of, that you would want to specifically limit, specifically not allow? And it's just a question.
Sorry, I have to laugh at marinas and boat docks.
Yeah, I know that's a silly one, right? Except that Brett's could potentially do that. It's not really a marina, but it.
Right.
Yeah.
As I think about the government agencies, I haven't heard of what's happening with the National Guard.
Yeah, so what
project,
happened,
But that
what-
would fall under this, would it not?
it would have fallen under this,
Yes.
but they're
Would have.
locating out on the West Plains
Oh,
by the
yeah.
airport, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
So
DNR,
maybe just.
DNR was-
Agency.
DNR was too hard to work with.
one government agency to another?
Yeah.
Yeah, too bad.
Other questions?
I have no issues with anything that's up there.
All right, that was just that was the question. Next slide, please.
Oh.
So the question is next steps. Did you see anything that you would like to see revised? And if not, the next step is SEPA in a public hearing before the Planning Commission. We can gin that up and have it ready to go for our July meeting, if you're ready to rock and roll on that. And we'll get that.
I just have one question
Sure.
on the grocery stores. So any that are existing, as long as they meet all the code and zoning requirements, they could go back and install?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
but
Which they could have done anyways, correct?
which they could have, they actually couldn't have done because they're in the M3 zone.
Well, they're in the wrong zone. Yeah, yeah.
So, and so if we go to the hearings for these two cases in July, assuming you make a decision, we'll have findings, conclusions, and recommendations on your August meeting schedule. And these could be going to city council for hearing in August or September.
You go back, I guess, 2 slides.
Sure.
Where you showed, and I just have a question for the commission if they want to allow truck stops.
Oh, back. If you could go forward one, please.
You guys
Under
know what truck?
marinas. The one under marinas.
Yeah, truck stops. You good with truck stops?
I would not be in favor of truck stops. Well, yeah. If you've looked at the truck stops around the region, it can be problematic. A lot of people would be stopping here in this, the city as they take that e-commerce across.
Other comments?
Do we have enough room anywhere in the city to have a truck stop? With the land that's available?
This B1 in the C2 zone. Yeah, potentially. I mean,
Maybe a small truck stop.
but not necessarily with direct access from the highway. So yeah, so that might be a consideration. You might not want to have a truck stop that is not right by the exit.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Other considerations? One of the things I would
Sorry.
mention, and I've mentioned it twice already, is we are also going to be tasked in our comprehensive plan of lowering greenhouse gases and also per capita vehicle trips.
Mhm.
Have to be conscious of that in approving something of adding half again as many fuel pumps. We would be adding both. We would increase both greenhouse gas and vehicle trips. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying that's right or wrong or would stop the consideration.
I would also make the point, and the flip side of that is that if you see big box stores or grocery stores that have gas pumps, if they have more pumps, they tend to have less line, less idling.
Sure.
And so that it's almost better to have more pumps with less idling from a greenhouse gas perspective. Just a
Okay.
thought.
Any other comments, questions?
Lisa just answered part of my question. Did staff see any issues or potential negative implications, having 12 pump sites as opposed to the gas stations only being allowed to have 8 and not being consistent?
So I don't necessarily see that because, but again, that would be something that we could look at. We could look at amending. There's only a limited number of places that are left in these zones that could potentially be gas or convenience stores.
Mhm.
But that is certainly, if you were to direct me to do so, we could easily include that in the amendment to include the convenience stores up to 12 gas pumps.
That's
If it-
kind of the point I was driving at, yeah, because just putting myself out there, if I'm a convenience store owner, which I'm not, I may see this as kind of, well, hey, how come they get 12? I
Right.
only get 8.
Mhm.
So,
Well, on that note, you could argue with our growing population, you could have a demand that's not, our code isn't really maybe supporting. You're, like you said earlier, I mean, how many vehicles can fuel up at a time,
mhm.
right?
Right. Commissioner Salva.
And Joe, Joe's point, I think that whether you notice it or not depends on how observant you are. But in our area, we are seeing many more electric vehicles that will not be using that. And I think that with regard to the 20% that we're tasked to
We do.
a reason, arbitrary or not, to do, I think that we're already seeing. I know I'm not gonna pull into this thing, and I know that if you take a look at how many of the vehicles are driving around now that are e-vehicles, and particularly Teslas in our city. I don't know whether it's gonna be 20% less, but to your point, if it's Costco, these are vehicles could be coming from outside of Liberty Lake and bringing in pollution. And so that's a good point.
Hmm.
And,
Well,
and if it is, and if we do, then I think we would want to take a look at whether or not 12 is realistic for 2024 and beyond, as opposed to 2024 and back when we had more fuel guzzling gas vehicles. So
Is not part of the gas tax for the state support that mission? You know,
to support the electrifying,
no, the lowering of the emissions.
That is part of the gas tax, yes, it is
So
part of that.
So
and
it's double taxation.
that's right.
It's part of it, and the other part is that the gas tax pays for a lot of the roadway improvements.
I understand. I'm just saying, if the state's gonna mandate something and take funds for a program that they want to put in place, and then on top of that, they're asking all the cities to double down on that effort. Right?
Well, the grant money actually probably came from
Yeah, the
that,
grant money is a
Yeah.
one-time shot. It's not gonna be
right.
continuous.
right?
So let's be realistic about that. So it's really an unfunded mandate after the grant money's gone. Right?
Get
Correct.
taxed after you die too, Phil, sorry. That's 3 times.
But just looking long term.
Any other questions or comments?
So again, I'm gonna ask the question, because there's some good conversation. So do you see any revisions that you'd like me to reflect in what we bring forward to hearing? Do you want to limit truck stops? Do you want to change the regulations as it relates to convenience stores to be consistent with what's being proposed here?
I don't have any problem if people don't want to have truck stops. I don't have any problem with limiting truck stops. I mean, I don't think we have enough room for one to begin with, but,
And then,
and then working with DOT to have one, I mean, we'd have to have the more on and off ramps, and we've already heard what they've said about that.
and the last piece on that is that, the truckers all know that if they just go another mile or
That's
two.
right.
I didn't want to say that, but that's the obvious.
That's the obvious, but
Exactly.
still.
70 cents less.
Well,
But again, circumstances can change in the future.
Mhm.
And so, this is your community, this is your code. If you want to protect against it, the best way to do it is to
Well,
include it.
I
in the
would say
ordinance.
take out the truck stops.
you want to make that a motion?
I motion.
Is there a second?
There's a second.
Second,
Ichi, yeah.
Any more discussion on it? One of the things I will mention about that truck stops, trucks idle for sometimes hours at a time.
Yep, 24
Sitting in
hours
a
a day.
truck stop. So just, that's one of the considerations. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye, all opposed? Thank you. So we
And-
eliminate truck stops.
Okay, and so the other proposal that I heard was that we should change the limited use standards for convenience stores to be consistent with the accessory use.
I would move that we adopt that.
So you're moving.
I didn't quite hear all of it, everything you just said there.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the other thing that I heard was that, was a suggestion that we change the limited use standard for convenience stores with gas stations to be consistent with what we're proposing for the limited use or for the accessory use. And did I hear you say that you?
Yes, I would like to motion that.
Second.
Motion second to, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that.
To make that consistent.
To make the convenience store gas station limited use standard consistent with the proposed accessory use gas station.
Which would be a maximum of 12 instead of 8.
Yes, thank you.
So to move everything up to 12 is what you're saying. Okay,
In the appropriate zoning.
in the
Yes.
appropriate zoning.
When-
Any discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. I will make those changes and we will schedule this for hearing in July.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, we're up for citizen comments. We don't have any present. Are there any online? Any citizens? Make comments? No, none online. So we will go to secretary's report.
So things are starting to heat up with the comprehensive planning pieces. Probably the biggest thing that the most important critical path for us has to do with housing and the methodology for allocating housing for all income levels countywide. And so we're having intensive discussions on that. We also, we've started our the climate chapter in terms of collecting data, et cetera. We are meeting and there's a subcommittee of the Planning Technical Advisory Committee that's looking at just that. Amy's leading up the climate piece. We have similarly, we have a housing subcommittee and that's and we're meeting pretty regularly trying to sort out the methodology. That is a piece that as soon as we have that, I want to present to you where we're at with it, what it looks like for our city and talk to you a little bit more about the methodology for for land capacity analysis. We're creating the GIS database to do that, to be able to do that analysis once we know what we're looking at for what we're trying to prove or disprove that we have enough capacity for. And so because we have hearings in July, my target is August, and if the committee has not yet figured out the methodology, I'm going to share with you how we're going to do the land capacity analysis. The other thing that I want to bring forward to you in August is a discussion about some amendments to our regulations related to emergency housing. Now, you have to realize that back in 2021, when we changed the housing as it related to supportive housing and emergency shelters, et cetera, because we were given less than 6 months to do it. We did it very quickly. Some of the rules that around that have changed since, and there's been more detail on the housing requirements. And one of the things that we are going to need to do right now we do meet the standards. We do allow for emergency shelters in all zones that allow all zones that allow hotels, but we limit the capacity, number one. And number two, we have separation distances. And the way our separation distances are set up right now in our capacity, it appears that we would not be able to, we would have to be amending that regardless in order to achieve land capacity analysis. I can't say that definitively until we actually have the numbers, but what I've seen from the two methodologies, it looks like we have a problem, Houston. If we change that, if we change our ordinance so that we don't have the separation distances and that the capacity is limited to what the fire code says, we don't have to do a land capacity analysis as it relates to emergency shelters. So one of the things that I'd like to propose is an amendment now so that we don't have to go through this math exercise only to see that we have to change our code anyhow. When I show you the math exercise, you'll understand how painful it's going to be.
Did this come out of the meeting with the county the other day?
No.
Did you guys participate in
This
that?
is something that I mentioned way back when I originally talked to you about the work program for the comp plan. And I mentioned that we were going to need to change our emergency housing code. That's what I was talking about. This just came out of some updates to the legislation and by the way, there's going to be more updates in 2024. So we are definitely planning with a moving target in terms of what the requirements are. But we have submitted for our planning our periodic update grant. I just submitted that today, so we'll be getting that July 1st. And we have a working draft, as you all know, for our work program, and we will be refining that as one of our first tasks. Lance is already working on a preliminary draft of the public engagement plan. We will be probably targeting a kickoff meeting for our comp plan in September. Summer's a terrible time to do it. So we'll be coming back to you as we kind of start putting some meat on the bones of this public participation plan. We did have a workshop with the Community Engagement Commission to seek their input and feedback. It may be when we're ready to kind of share the initial bones of the draft that we may want to do a joint workshop between Planning Commission and the Community Engagement Commission, since my sincere hope is that they will help us paint our fence, because we've got a lot of engagement that has to happen in the next 2 years.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When you talk about emergency shelters or housing, is that like truly temporary type structures or are you like
No.
FEMA trailers or are you talking?
Well, it could be, but typically it's like congregate care. And it's
So
like,
it's a permanent structure.
typically. Typically with social services also supportive and the models
Trying to
changing.
understand what that term really means in my mind.
So when we workshop it,
Yeah.
I will bring you some definitions. My apologies.
I'll let
I
Google-
I
I'll
went
let
I went
Google
a-
help me in the meantime.
I went a little deep on that, but we've got, the pace is gonna start picking up pretty quickly on comp plan. I will say that at city council meeting on Tuesday, the emergency ordinance to suspend comp plan and ordinance development or comp plan and comp plan and code amendments for 2025 and 2026 is on the agenda. And so, the resolution does reflect that you all recommended that we do that because we got a lot of work to do in the next 2 years. That's it for the secretary's report.
Planning commissioner reports, anybody reports?
Nothing here.
Anybody? Just a quick note, if you are not on the Department of Commerce's mailing list, you should get on it. I sat in on a 2-hour Zoom conference this morning where they're going over comprehensive plan changes and different issues, including environmental, housing. They went over all the latest laws that have been passed and the sources of those laws. And you can go to Commerce's website. All of these conferences are recorded. So you can actually go in and if there are things you're not interested in hearing about, you can fast forward and listen to other things. But I urge you to get on that mailing list so that you can see and get more of a background about what we're going to be faced with this comprehensive plan modifications that have to be in place by 2026. So it's really a great resource and something I didn't know today. Commerce is not a regulatory agency. I did not realize that. And so
Yes, but the legislature is.
yeah, it isn't, but the legislature, that's correct. But it was a lot of good information. Today's was at a very high level in terms of looking at things, but they're going to start getting into more detailed things, particularly environmental issues and housing issues and those kind of things that we're going to be faced with. So I urge you, if you're not on the mailing list, please get on it. And it doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, I didn't stay for 2 hours today, but I heard the things I wanted to hear about. So I urge you to do that.
I will say that I will send out to all of you the link to Commerce's page where you can sign up to be on their mailing list, but also where all the resources are. And if you have an interest, there's a lot of guidance. There's thousands and thousands of pages of guidance, and Amy and Lance and I are all digging into it. And so, we'll be, as we present to you on specific topics, we'll also be including in our presentations some links for some more detail if we get your brain juices flowing.
Price those.
Any other comments for the good of the order? We will entertain a motion for adjournment. Nobody wants to adjourn.
I moved to adjourn.
Moved and seconded. Thank you, everyone. We are done.
Thank you.